Before the world sees the miracle, God sends the silence. Not to punish you, but to prepare the one who will carry what's coming next. There comes a moment in every life, a stillness so loud it deafens you, a silence so long it starts to feel like abandonment. You pray, but the heavens feel locked. You cry out, but no echo returns. You're doing everything right, discipline, devotion, dedication, and yet, nothing. No doors open, no signs appear, no voices whisper back. And in that silence, something dangerous begins to creep in. Doubt. Not the loud kind that screams, "You're not enough." No, this is subtler. It seeps in, like water under a locked door. It questions not just your ability, but your purpose. You start to wonder, did I imagine the calling? Was the dream just an illusion? Did I mistake my own desires for God's direction? But what if I told you? That silence is not absence. That silence is strategy. You see, God isn't noisy when He's working deeply. And the louder the world becomes, the quieter heaven speaks. Because what God is doing in silence is sacred. And sacred things aren't shouted. He's not ignoring you. He's preparing you. The silence before the breakthrough is not punishment. It's positioning. Think of it. Before David was crowned king, he was chased through caves. Before Joseph ruled Egypt, he was thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, left to rot in prison. Before Jesus stepped into ministry, he endured 40 days in the wilderness alone. The silence is never without purpose. It's the sacred cocoon before flight. It's the soil burying the seed before the bloom. It's the final breath before the trumpet blows. But here's the hard truth. Most people don't make it through the silence. They quit too early. They mistake stillness for rejection. They walk away right when heaven is aligning their moment. You're closer than you think. But breakthroughs require birthing, and birthing requires labor. And in that labor, it gets dark. It gets messy. It gets painful. And it gets quiet. Not because you're being punished, but because you're being trusted. God goes silent when He wants to see if you can walk without needing applause. He hides His hand to see if you'll still move in faith. He removes the noise so you can hear what's eternal. Not your emotions, not your ego, not your fear, but your calling. Silence is not the end. It's the shaping ground, the gym of the soul, the battlefield where warriors are made in secret. You want the crown, you must survive the cave. You want the miracle, you must endure the mundane. The silence is the test before the triumph, the wilderness before the promised land, the dark room before the photograph appears. And here's the twist, God's silence is often loudest right before the walls fall. He doesn't shout when He's already set the chain reaction in motion. He wants to know, will you still believe when it feels like I'm gone? Will you still obey when the blessing hasn't shown up yet? Will you keep showing up when no one's watching? Because make no mistake, He is watching. And He's not just watching what you do. He's watching who you're becoming. Character is forged in the quiet. Wisdom is born in the waiting. Faith is proven in the fire. Anyone can praise when the promise is fulfilled. But only the chosen can worship in the silence. Only the relentless keep walking when the lights go out. Only the faithful keep digging when the well runs dry. So if you're in that space, that aching, echoing silence, where it feels like you've been left behind, understand this. You're not in the wrong place. You're not being punished. You're not forgotten. You're in the waiting room of your destiny. And the silence is the sound of everything coming together behind the curtain. Don't mistake God's silence for His absence. Don't confuse the delay with denial. He is setting the stage, moving pieces, aligning time, space, and people for the moment only you can step into. But here's the key. You must be the person worthy of the promise. And sometimes becoming that person requires going through the silence. You want the reward of a king, then endure the exile of a shepherd. You want the impact of a giant, then walk through the emptiness of the cave. Because no one who was born for greatness was ever handed it on a silver platter. It's given in silence. It's forged in fire. It's earned through obedience in the dark. You see, when everything goes quiet, that's when your true voice gets tested. Not the one you use when people are clapping. The one you rely on when no one's listening. The inner voice, the conviction voice. Because in the silence, God isn't just testing your faith, He's teaching you to trust your own decision. Not the kind you make with a crowd watching, but the kind you make alone, with shaking hands and a steady soul. The kind that says, I still believe. I'm not backing down. I will not surrender this dream just because it hurts to hold it. That is the voice He's developing in you. Because when the breakthrough comes, when the doors swing open, when the opportunities flood in, He doesn't want you walking through it wondering if you're ready. He wants you walking through it knowing I was built for this. You don't sharpen a sword in battle. You sharpen it in the quiet, in the dark, alone. And you don't sharpen it once. You sharpen it daily. That's why the silence lingers. Because it's in the silence you learn discipline. You learn to move without validation. You learn to speak victory before you see the proof. And let me tell you something only the faithful understand. Obedience in silence is the loudest kind of worship. When you keep showing up after rejection, when you keep writing after the world has gone quiet, when you keep sowing in a barren field, that's when heaven leans in. Because God isn't impressed by comfort. He's drawn to courage. And there's no greater courage than continuing to act on a promise that feels dead. Ask Abraham, ask Moses, ask Ruth, ask anyone who ever walked into something divine. Before the breakthrough came, there was a silence so deep they thought it might break them. But it didn't. It made them. So if you're in the silence, don't just sit there. Stand up in it. Speak truth in it. Train harder in it. Work deeper in it. Because this is not a pause, it's a preparation. You're not being delayed. You're being developed. And here's something else the silence will teach you. What's not real will not survive it. The fake dreams. They fade when there's no applause. The shallow motives. They wither when there's no spotlight. The ego-driven ambitions. They vanish in the absence of affirmation. But purpose survives silence. Purpose grows in silence. Purpose is baptized in silence. If your vision can't make it through the quiet, it's not ready for the crowd. So use this silence. Don't curse it. Cultivate your mind in it. Sharpen your routines in it. Anchor your soul in it. Because when the silence breaks, and it will, the ones who endured it are the ones who will rise with unshakable clarity. While others fall apart at the pressure of promotion, you'll stand strong. Because you were trained in the furnace no one else saw. Because you fought battles no one ever praised. Because you bled in places no one will ever write about. But heaven took note. And here's a hard truth wrapped in grace. If God gave it to you before the silence, you'd have destroyed it. Not because you're weak, but because you weren't ready. The silence is not to punish you. It's to prepare you for sustainability. Anyone can achieve a moment of success, but can you carry the weight of blessing and not break? Can you lead without losing yourself? Can you rise without becoming someone else? That's what the silence asks. That's what the silence demands. Because silence isn't the absence of God's activity. It's the depth of His craftsmanship. He's not ignoring you. He's chiseling you, removing the unnecessary, hollowing out the pride, cutting the insecurity, sharpening your discernment, fortifying your spirit. He's turning you into someone who doesn't need to chase opportunities, because you'll attract them by who you've become. That's the real work. That's the true breakthrough. Becoming the version of yourself who can handle what you've prayed for. You think you're waiting on the blessing. But the blessing is waiting on you to evolve, to mature, to align. So stop asking why he's quiet and start asking what you still need to become. Because the minute you become the person your future demands, the breakthrough will no longer be delayed. It will be released. The silence is not a cage. It's a classroom. And the longer you sit in it, the more you realize it's not about the noise around you. It's about the voice within you. Because before God gives you influence, He teaches you integrity. Before He gives you platform, He teaches you private power. Before He gives you impact, He teaches you identity. And identity is not found in moments of glory. It's found in moments of invisibility, in the shadows, when no one is clapping, when no one is calling, when no one even knows your name. Can you still speak life when your own life feels buried? Can you still believe in the promise when the process feels like punishment? Can you still stand up straight when the weight of silence is pressing down on your back? Because let me tell you something few people will admit. The silence is heavy. It doesn't just test your patience. It tests your posture. Will you slouch in defeat or stand in defiance of your fear? Because that's what faith really is. Not a feeling, not a song, not a quote on your wall. Faith is standing tall when your knees want to buckle. Faith is getting up again when you hear nothing back. Faith is walking forward when every step feels like it's being swallowed by the unknown. And this is where most people turn back. They wait. And when the voice doesn't return, they return to who they were. But those who are truly called, they stay. They listen longer. They get quiet enough to hear the whisper behind the silence. Because the silence isn't empty. It's full of preparation, full of instruction, full of fire, full of breakthrough waiting to be claimed. But you can't hear it when you're running. You can't hear it when you're panicking. You only hear it when you settle in. You have to stop filling the silence with noise and start mining it for wisdom. Because God is not a God of constant chatter. He speaks, and then He watches, like a teacher during a test. He doesn't speak during the exam. He's already given you the material. Now, He wants to see what will you do with what you already know? Will you trust the training? Will you remember the promise? Will you stand on what was spoken, even when what's happening feels opposite? That's the test, and that's the turning point. Because the silence is not a signal to stop, it's a signal to step. You've been praying for a sign. But what if the silence is the sign? What if it's heaven saying, you already know what to do? Now prove that you're ready to do it. You see, breakthrough doesn't come to the one who waits the longest. It comes to the one who moves while waiting, who walks while uncertain, who builds while unseen, who acts while afraid. That's the key. Obedience in uncertainty, motion in mystery, boldness in the void. The most dangerous kind of believer is the one who moves with no guarantee, but with unshakable faith. Because when you move like that, heaven moves with you. You stop needing signs. You start becoming the sign, the evidence, the miracle that someone else points to. You want to know why God goes silent? Because He's already equipped you. Because He's already spoken. Because He's waiting to see if you'll act like you believe Him. Not when it's easy. Not when it's obvious. But now when it costs you something. That's where destiny lives. Not in the comfort zone, but in the quiet zone. Where you keep walking, keep working, keep believing, even when the heavens give you nothing back. And that is exactly why you are so dangerous to the enemy. Because you've learned to thrive without applause. You've learned to trust without proof. You've learned to move without needing permission from people who don't even understand your calling. That's power. That's alignment. That's faith that moves mountains. And here's the truth. The silence that once haunted you, it will become the story that fuels others. Because you didn't break in the silence. You were reborn in it. The world will see the breakthrough. but only you will remember the silence that birthed it. Only you will carry the scars of the waiting season. Only you will understand that the silence wasn't punishment. It was preparation for legacy. The silence was sacred, and it changed you, not in a surface-level motivational way, but in the deepest corners of your being. It rewired how you think. It redefined what you chase. It shattered who you pretended to be. Because silence does what comfort never could. It purifies purpose. You stop chasing what looks good. You start chasing what's God-breathed. You stop asking, how fast can I get there? And you start asking, who must I become along the way? The silence makes you still enough to hear the real questions. It reveals where your identity was built on sand, on applause, on progress, on performance. And then it strips it down piece by piece until only truth remains. Not the version of you that people admire, the version of you that heaven designed. Because breakthrough doesn't require more talent. It requires alignment. Alignment with vision, with truth, with integrity, with identity. And silence is the scalpel that makes that alignment possible. It cuts away the masks. It forces you to sit with your own thoughts, to wrestle with your own reflection, to make peace with your past and command your future. That's the fire of transformation. That's what the silence was for. So if you're there, still waiting, still walking, still hoping, let me tell you this: you're not behind. You're not forgotten. You're being perfected. You've prayed for elevation. But elevation without foundation is fatal. You've asked for influence, but God needed to make sure your character wouldn't collapse under the weight of it. Because the spotlight doesn't reveal who you are. It exposes who you are. And He loves you too much to let your gifting take you where your soul isn't ready to go. That's why the silence stayed. Not to hurt you, but to heal you. He was removing dependencies, stripping away crutches, tearing out idols you didn't even know you were serving. The need to be seen, the addiction to progress, the fear of being left behind. He pulled them out by the root, so your foundation could be unshakable. Because the next season won't just require your gifts. It will demand your depth, the kind of depth that only silence can produce. And let me tell you something few understand. The enemy fears silence too, because he knows what's born in it. The enemy doesn't mind a busy believer. He fears a rooted one who doesn't need noise to be faithful, one who doesn't need followers to walk in authority, one who knows how to stand still and know. That's what you're becoming. That's what the silence has shaped in you. So when the doors open, and they will walk through them differently, not with desperation, not with ego, not with a need to prove anything, but with a quiet confidence forged in fire. You won't need to explain the silence to anyone. Your presence will say it all. Because when someone has been refined by the silence, you can feel it in how they speak, in how they walk, in how they don't chase but attract, in how they don't perform, they embody. This is who you're becoming. This is why God was silent, because He wasn't giving you a moment. He was building a movement inside of you. And movements take time. Movements need roots. Movements require pruning, isolation, and vision that's stronger than validation. Don't let the silence make you small. Let it make you still. Still enough to remember the one who called you is not confused. He hasn't changed His mind. He hasn't lost track of time. He's not worried about your detours. He's not frustrated with your questions. He's God, and He finishes what He starts. If He led you to it, He will lead you through it. And if you are in the middle of that unbearable quiet, where nothing makes sense and everything feels still, don't break. Because just when the silence reaches its loudest point, something shifts, not with fireworks, but with certainty. A door opens, a phone rings, a meeting happens, A breakthrough bursts through like dawn after the longest night, and you'll know. The silence wasn't for nothing. It was preparation for everything. Because when that moment comes, when the silence breaks and heaven breathes, it won't feel like a surprise. It'll feel like a confirmation. You won't be shocked. You'll be ready. You'll recognize it not because it came wrapped in applause, but because your spirit has been rehearsing it for years. That deal, that connection, that open door. It didn't just fall out of the sky. It was birthed in the barrenness. It was shaped in the silence. And you were built for this. The waiting didn't weaken you. It woke you up. The silence didn't break you. It broke off what didn't belong. The dark didn't defeat you. It taught you how to move without needing the light. Now you walk with different eyes. Now you hear in higher frequencies. Now you trust not because of what you see, but because of what you know. Because you've lived the silence. You've sat in the furnace. You've prayed prayers that got no reply, and still you stayed. You endured. You believed. And that's what makes you unstoppable. Because anyone can speak faith when it's easy. Anyone can be bold when they're winning. But few, very few, can walk in fire and come out refined instead of ruined. And now you carry a different weight. Not the weight of performance, the weight of presence. A calm authority, a sacred resolve. A knowing that says, I've been through silence, and I found strength there. You no longer need to rush, because you know who you are. You no longer need to impress, because your identity was already settled in the wilderness. You no longer beg for validation, because God already stamped your name with purpose before the world ever clapped for you. And that's the shift. You stop hustling for what you're already worthy of. You stop proving and start embodying. You stop chasing opportunities and start becoming the kind of person opportunities chase. This is what the silence produces. Not hype, wait. And wait moves things. Wait shifts rooms. Wait causes others to pause to listen, to sense that something is different about you. Because you didn't just survive the waiting, you transformed in it. And now you carry what so many seek: unshakable identity. Rooted purpose, disciplined patience, obedient action, and listen carefully. Those are the foundations of unstoppable breakthrough. The kind of breakthrough that doesn't fade after the moment passes. The kind that multiplies. The kind that plants seeds in others. The kind that changes atmospheres. The kind that doesn't just elevate you, it elevates everyone connected to you. Because the silence didn't just prepare you for a stage. It prepared you for a mantle, a responsibility, a calling far greater than comfort. A mission that requires you to be stable in storms, steady in chaos, and grounded when the world gets loud again. You see, the silence taught you how to walk when no one was cheering. So now that the crowd shows up, you don't need them to keep going. You are no longer powered by applause. You are powered by assignment. That's the power of silence. It unplugs you from the world's noise and reconnects you to divine direction. You don't just feel called. You know you're chosen. You don't just feel stirred, you're sent. And from this place, this posture of stillness turns strength. Everything changes. Now when you speak, your words carry conviction. Now when you build, it's on rock, not sand. Now when you lead, it's not from ego, it's from clarity. The silence cleared your vision. Now the breakthrough is no longer a fantasy. It's a reality you were shaped to carry. So now you stand here, not as the same person who once cried out in confusion, but as someone who understands that silence was never absence. It was alignment. God was not ignoring you. He was anchoring you. He was not punishing you. He was preparing the weight you'd carry and the depth you'd need to carry it with grace. Because elevation without depth is dangerous. And you weren't born for temporary highs. You were born for eternal impact. So He let you sit in that silence. until the noise inside you broke, until the addictions to control were shattered, until the need for approval was starved out, until the old version of you was buried, not branded. Only then, only in that sacred stillness, could you hear what most people never do. The voice of purpose that doesn't shout but whispers. And you listened. You listened when nothing made sense. You listened when it hurt. You listened when your prayers went unanswered, and your friends disappeared, and your strength seemed to shrink under the weight of disappointment. But that listening made you lethal. It gave you ears to hear what's eternal, eyes to see past the fog, and hands steady enough to build something that lasts. And now you move differently. Not faster, but freer. Not louder, but deeper. Not desperately, but with divine certainty. Because what came out of the silence wasn't just a plan, it was a person. You, rebuilt, refined, realigned. The silence didn't delay your destiny. It delivered you to it. And that's why when you speak now, it resonates. When you act, it creates momentum. When you show up, rooms shift. Not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. Because you carry peace forged in chaos. Wisdom born in the void. Authority that doesn't come from titles, but from trials. You don't need to prove you're ready. You've already been proven. By the silence. By the unseen war. By the private battles. By the lonely nights. And now the world will see the fruit, but you will always remember the root, the tears that watered it, the prayers that built it, the silence that protected it, the fire that purified it. So when your moment comes, and it will walk through that door with your head high and your spirit still. Don't explain. Don't apologize. Don't shrink to make others comfortable. You've earned this moment in the silence. You've bled for it. You've waited for it. You've been molded by the hands of the Almighty for such a time as this. The silence was the setup. This is the shift. This is the season. This is the sound of breakthrough. So rise, walk boldly, speak truth. Move like the silence taught you to move. Build like the silence taught you to build. Believe like the silence taught you to believe. Because the silence is over. And now it's your time. The world is about to witness what God whispered in the dark. But you already know. This is why he was silent right before the breakthrough. If this message spoke to something deep in you, then don't just let it pass. Like it. Share it. Leave your mark below. Your story may be in the silence now, but breakthrough is already moving toward you. Stay faithful. Stay ready. And remember, when God goes quiet, it's never the end. It's the beginning of something greater than you can imagine.